Okay, perfect. Well, I will get us started. Megan's going to keep an eye on everything to let folks in. But hello, everyone. Welcome to our first ever Thrive Recap event. I'm Sammy Bonner, chapter president for IIDA Ohio, Kentucky, and one of the moderators for this year's Thrive event. We're so excited to get together and share a little bit more about this award-winning roundtable event and series. And we're hoping that this recap format kind of sparks conversation and interest in this event across the chapter as we move into planning for future events. This year's theme was Thrive by You, and we asked senior leaders what challenges they were facing, what keeps them up at night, and how we can better evolve the future of the interior design profession and just the region in general. So across all 5 city centers, we heard incredibly similar challenges and opportunities. But we were also honored to have 2 additional moderators join us for this event this year, just to help diversify and deepen the types of conversations across each region. So first, I'll start with Mark Bryan. He's the Chief Research and Strategy Officer with IIDA headquarters, and he moderated the Columbus City Center.
Yep, it was really a great time. I think what struck me was how eager everybody really was to talk to each other. I think sometimes we get caught up in our silos sometimes, and it's really good to bring people together. In fact, I think somebody made a comment that they wish they had 2 hours instead of just 1 hour. So my hope is that we will have more of these conversations in the future.
Absolutely. And then we also had Michelle Bolton, Vice President of A&B Design, E-Tools, and Showroom Strategy for Kimball International. And she moderated the Cincinnati, Dayton, and Louisville, Lexington roundtables.
Yes, it was great. Mark, to your point, there's nothing better than having a space to share. I always say, I've never met a designer that doesn't like to give their opinion, right? We are typically vocal people, and there's nothing better than giving back to ourselves and really, talking about some of these topics that were across the chapter, but in each individual, like the 2 that I, moderated, were different. And the things that sort of bubbled up to the surface were a little different. I think there's something special about having a regional view as a chapter and then the local view as well.
Absolutely. I'll echo the same things across Cleveland, Akron, and Toledo. We had such productive conversations and able to really open up the room and be a little more honest than I think that we normally get the opportunity to be. So excited to have this recap to kind of go through all of those findings. We're also joined today by Phil Rowland. He's the Director of Environmental Graphic Design at GBBN. Up in that corner, if you can see him, he'll be doing a graphic recording for us today. So you'll all be getting a little postcard with some graphic takeaways of what we discussed today. So keep on the lookout for that. And just to open us up, just wanted to poll the audience here. If you were able to join us for one of the roundtables, can you give a little heart in the chat for us? A hand raise, that works too.
How many of you were, we're just trying to discern, see a couple, right? Thank you. Perfect. Had a few. Oh, good. Okay.
Ooh, fire emoji. I love
that. Fire.
Was there anyone who is joining us that was not able to make it? And if you can drop in the chat something maybe you're excited to hear from us today. Amazing. Well, keep the chat live. We can see all of your responses here as well. So if you've got anything you want to chime in or add to the conversation, please feel free. We want to feel like a dialogue with the whole group. So we'll just jump right into some of our big picture thoughts across all 5 groups. So talking about a moment of tension and opportunity. So I guess for Michelle, can you talk a little bit about what felt consistent across the 2 roundtables that you moderated?
I mean, I think some of the consistency was just the willingness to share and be vulnerable, which I think can be, a little scary at times. I feel like when you get into these kinds of discussions, and I notice this across other IIDA, venues and events, like we all sort of put down we are competitors or we are whatever. We are all here on mission team design. And I think that's a great thing. I mean, some of the topics like that were just consistent were everything from, like the tension between how to be a leader and get professional development at the same time, how to provide feedback for, we all want to be good leaders. And so how do you provide feedback to, the people that you're leading in a way that's compelling to them? So just some of the tensions there. And then the good old, AI was a topic of discussion. I purposefully tried to hold it more to the end of our two discussions because I think sometimes it takes over. Right. And it could be the only thing that we talk about. And I thought based on the feedback from the folks in Cincinnati, Dayton and Lulex, there was a lot to go through on us, on the humans in our industry. Right. And so, but those were some common themes that we saw.
I agree. Very similar in Toledo and Cleveland. A lot of passion, a lot of excitement for what the future could be, but maybe not quite solid on what the concrete next steps are.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because one of the things, so in reading all of the notes, I kind of felt myself feeling like there's this double Dutch moment that everybody's in right now. We're all kind of like standing on the same precipice or waiting to jump into something, but nobody's really taking that leap fully yet. It's almost like we're waiting to see who steps in first to make the move and then learn from their mistakes. And I think that's not a knock on us as an industry as a whole. It makes sense. Risk is something that we often get challenged with and are afraid of. But I feel like we've lost a little something of that grit that we used to have to be okay with some failure as long as we made an attempt at something. But I feel like everybody's in that moment. So kind of Michelle, to what you were saying is like we're all in this collective moment where we're struggling with very similar things around talent, around AI, around strategy, and around management time, all of that.
Came up with all of you, I think that's where the AI discussion got interesting because I think there were, folks in the room who shared some of the things they're doing that are very productive and not scary. And I think I saw like scribbling notes and like you could see almost like what I would call like a popcorn moment and folks and in people's minds around like, wait a minute, I could do that and I could bring that to my firm or I could do that for myself and give myself time back. There's we're very protective of our time post-pandemic. And so that I thought was an interesting cross.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was curiosity in what tools others are using as well, which was exciting.
Yep, exactly.
I think, kind of transitioning us into sort of the next big theme was a lot of leadership in the missing middle, which is kind of what we've highlighted as some of the takeaways, but clear pathways for how you can be a leader at your firm, where you started as a designer and then down the line you're asked to suddenly be a business leader and how that transition kind of unfolds. And I think that was a big, I don't want to call it a heartache because I think people are excited about the opportunity, but that transition can be a bit of a challenge, I think, for folks.
Yeah, I would say that came through very clearly in the Columbus Roundtable because one person said it best that we're not trained to be business leaders. We're trained to be designers or creative professionals. And then we learn the business as we go through. And so that learning by going through is a great learning experience, but it's not the only one that we need. And so I think some people were talking about maybe needing to take another course or taking another class. I know at IADHQ, we've heard very clearly that financial literacy is something that a lot of designers need because maybe they took an economics class or maybe something else in college, but that's probably about it. And so I definitely feel like that path to leadership needs a clearer way of telling people how they're making the decisions and why they're making the decisions. So they understand the business implications beyond just we are going to be producing good design or good products or good sales or business development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see Megan's note about a design business mini MBA, which I know we've talked about from a programming standpoint with IIDA is how do we as a chapter provide that sort of resource for folks as well? And I think a big topic was that leadership doesn't always equate to your design skill either. And there are people that need to maybe have a different option and path than truly being that people leader. So what does that look like?
And I would say like in both Cincinnati, Sunday and Lulex, there was definitely a little bit of like mysticism in what the next step is, to your point, right? I mean, on a variety of levels, but from a leadership standpoint, there's what we talked about, particularly in Sunday, was with the economic conditions, senior leaders are staying put longer.
Mhm.
And so there is this tension, back to the word that we've used now a few times, in what does my next step look like? I don't have a next step right now because that person who would have, you know, sort of retired and gone on to the next chapter is still in the role. And so like, what does that look like? And how does, if that's happening across the industry, that will change a lot of things. There's a lot of domino effects that come with that. So that's something that we talked about. And we definitely talked about this idea. Then in Lulex, we talked really a lot about that professional development and how can we seek out and be curious. And we're not, you know, most of us in our design degree didn't have a ton of business courses. And, you know, so how can we, everything from Udemy or Linda or LinkedIn Learning, or is there a, like a local municipal, Megan, I'm seeing you're putting in like kind of the mini MBA, but where are there places beyond the traditional sources that we can sort of consume development?
But also, I think, I
Because there's a
forget,
cost factor a lot too, that we talked about.
there was one, as I was reading the notes, I forget where it was, but somebody made the mention of perhaps that education is over indexing on the rendering.
Mhm.
And that really struck home for me. And this is, again, not a condemnation of education. Education has its own struggles, things like that. But I do wonder, do we need to start leaning on our educators to say, we need more design business education along with the aesthetics, along with the principles, along with the materiality? You know, is that part of that next evolution so that when the students arrive, they have a lot of those skill sets? Because that's the other thing that we keep hearing is that when these new students arrive, there's a skill gap that they don't have. Like it could be something as simple as putting a PowerPoint presentation together or being able to run an Excel spreadsheet, or like, because we still have these old tools. And I know I'm maybe dating myself here, but those are still in use. And so we still need to like provide at least some cursory understanding of how to use them, even if we know that they may transition to something new, something different in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
This is a topic, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm going to agree. Absolutely. I think there's this big, I mean, not to bring us back to the rendering and AI conversation as well, but like that big conversation of a pretty picture gets you really far in some ways and not always in a substantial way for how to execute a project.
Yeah.
Very similar along those lines.
And it's one of the things that realistically could be taken over by AI.
Mhm.
It is.
The
It really
rendering,
is.
right?
Yeah.
And so for, that's what we're spending a ton of time to teach, does that, we're not necessarily future proofing there.
Agreed.
The business of design is something I'm particularly passionate about. And I talk to a lot of educators from my role. I just wrapped up my 3 years on the international board. Sad. But you know, that is something that I've talked about with a number of educators, and it's something that I think is on sort of all of our shoulders to champion.
Yeah.
Is how do we, and when I've talked and dug in a little bit, it is not so much about how to run your own practice.
Correct.
It is more about how to, my number one thing that I always champion any young designer, or any designer really, but particularly emerging talent, is be like bilingual. You speak design, but you got to speak business.
Mhm.
You have to know what a CFO cares about
Yeah.
and translate your design into something that they're going to latch onto so they don't kick your details out the window.
Yeah.
And some of those pieces are, you know, things that as we build the next level of leader, I think those are going to be critical.
I think that's an interesting almost segue into the next kind of overarching theme we saw about the talent. I don't want to call it a talent gap because I don't know that that's it. I think, Michelle, you used leak in the bucket.
Yeah.
Passion. Because I think for a lot of us, design is a very empathetic practice. Exactly what you said. Putting yourself in the CFO's position, thinking about the decisions and how the space is used. And that passion leak feels like maybe a lack of empathy for folks as well. If you're not getting to meet with those decision makers, or maybe if you're not in front of a client very often, you're not getting that same sort of empathetic thinking.
Mhm.
Yeah, we talked about that for all my Lulux and Day folks out there. That was something that came up a lot, was this, and it's not, I think there's a misconception that the passion leak in the bucket is at a certain stage of career, when in reality, what we talked about is a lot of people feel that way. So we talked about A, why is it happening? B, what does that mean for an industry that's built on empathy, and we are passionate about what we do, right? We are humankind's problem solver. Design changes the world. If you have a leak in your passion bucket, that's a problem. And then we talked about like, what are some ways that we can restore it? Everything from, uh, programs like IIDA, bringing programming that helps restore some of that, to not relying on IIDA to bring leaders like this together in the first place, And so like, how do we, because I asked them like, how often do you guys talk to each other? And it's not as often as what maybe we could and should.
Yeah, agreed. We got into that quite a bit in Cleveland. I think in Columbus, I attended as well. Towards the end, you get that, oh, we could talk for 2 hours. We should do this more often. We could have even more candid conversations about these topics, that I think then sparks people's excitement, passion, whatever, for IIDA, for looking into how you can be a more effective leader, and the types of tools, resources, et cetera. So how do we bring this passion throughout our programming in all things?
Well, what strikes me is, as I'm thinking about what was said, kind of around this, is that there were several leaders that talked about there's also a lack of confidence that they're seeing in a lot of their employees. And some of that is right or wrong due to maybe a lack of psychological safety, being able to feel like they have the ability to ask a question and not get knocked for it, or the ability to even make a mistake. And I think part of that is what, and I know we're going to talk about other things here and like mentoring, but somebody named like, we need confidence coaches. We need our leaders to be confidence coaches, so that way we can help people have the confidence, which would then help spark the passion in being able to explore, experiment, and iterate. Because I think that's sometimes where the passion gets lost, when you don't have that chance to provide that iteration, to provide that exploration. You're just told what to do. It's very rote. It's very robotic. And a lot of us went into design in this industry because we wanted to save the world. We wanted to create better places, create more outcomes. And I think that's the other side of what was said in our room, was that we need to be better at stating what the outcomes of the problem is first before we start the design. And I think if we can link outcomes to the project, that's where we can have passion again for it. If like we're really trying to make spaces that help people to heal faster, or to learn, things in a new way, that's different than saying we want to design a really beautiful place. The beautiful place will come, but we need to have the outcomes so that we can get excited about what we're producing.
Yes. And then that actually like step change is where design fits in from a credibility standpoint. We talked about that quite a bit actually at Thrive a couple years ago. Was sort of like, it's so frustrating for all of us as designers that people don't know what the value of interior design is. In many cases, that is a sad but true fact. And when we can understand what the mission is, we know that. I do believe that we know that, we ask those questions, but if we can get really skilled at translating it into the stakeholders that care about it, we only help ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of redefining what those expectations are as well. Like, I think as everyone knows on this call, nothing that we do is 100% perfect. No one has ever produced, maybe you have, a 100% perfect set of construction documents.
If you have, leave us a chat.
Yes,
We'd like to talk more. So.
What are you doing? Are you a bot?
But I think there's this, the weight of expectation that weighs people down quite a bit about making a mistake, failing, which I find failure in our industry.
We have that up here, the pressure, make input, like
be more billable. Yeah. Be more creative.
Do it faster, make it better. It is that.
Absolutely a recipe.
It's more. There's a frenetic energy that I have noticed ramping at a tremendous pace in the last 12 months.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if that is an AI born thing. Mark, I'd be very curious with from your futurist hat. Like, where do you guys sense that?
Like the frenetic energy of the industry.
Of the, not
The
just the
world?
industry. Like, I notice it.
The world might be a bigger question that we
So-
can tackle.
It's funny
Let's call
because
it the built environment.
the built environment. I don't know if I would say frenetic is the right word because I think a frenetic is almost like, well, it's a frenzy that is uncontrollable. I think there is a lack of understanding how to deal with uncertainty.
Mm.
And I think there are multiple uncertainties that are creating new conditions that, again, goes back to that double Dutch moment where nobody's really sure how to take that next step forward. And so I think part of the reason that maybe we're in this moment is because we have gotten away from being okay with failure, being okay with things being at 80%, with, again, making that attempt and knowing that the attempt is the start, but not the finish, you know, and I think that's where, like, when I try to talk to people, I'm like, you need to understand what the end goal is first. And then what you do is you step backward from there to say, what can I do in this project? What can I learn from that to do in the next project? It's something we naturally do, but we don't talk about enough, I don't think. And I think that would help with some of this uncertainty that everybody's feeling, like, because I think everybody is just trying to, maybe the frenetic part is people are just trying to throw spaghetti at a wall.
I mean,
and
there's
see what
just,
sticks.
yeah, and I think with AI, and maybe this is like, more on the business side, I don't know. It's very easy to whip out a AI response to something and then it's off your plate and onto somebody else's. And I think
Mm.
that's some of what you feel. But back to your failure. This came up in Lulex in particular. And like, there are some leaders out there, highly commend all of you who are really talking about sitting down with your emerging talent in particular and saying, you're gonna fail. It's okay to fail. I expect you to fail. And I failed, and really humanizing failure. And that seems to be some things that are helping, which kind of maybe leads into like that mentoring and coaching that really needs to come with leadership and kind of bringing it back to the basics of how design works.
You have somebody that shared that they told their staff they want them to spend 2 hours on the problem and like to spin on it and to iterate on it and to like let that be the way that they learn from like
Yes.
those kind of iterations.
Yes.
I feel like that's the thing that, everybody's talking about AI will make us better like editors. I think it's gonna make us better iterators too.
Yeah.
And I think that's good and bad. And I know we're gonna talk about AI later, so I don't want to dive into that too much, but I think that's where we can have passion again too, is that iteration part of it by trying and failing. Like I was just talking with somebody, she's retired from the industry, but she was saying that she got to pick up her trash paper and like do sketches again for the first time. And that just reignited her passion. And I think that goes back to that iteration part as well too.
Yeah.
Well, interesting that you say that because I feel like we had in Columbus, we talked a lot about like how you pull that out of someone from an emerging talent perspective. And in Cleveland, we had some interesting perspectives on you give someone something and then you're maybe not getting that iterative time at all. And it's, can I get it off my plate to the next person? So I think there's lots to be learned about the encouragement to do that iteration. Like, how do you force someone to try and think differently about a problem that maybe they can only think about in one way?
Yeah.
I mean, heck, redline something for me. Like,
Exactly.
because like, honestly, that's the best learning tool. And we all went through the crits, we all went through the critiques. Maybe we do it with a little bit more empathy now versus like what we went and experienced in school. But I think that's part of the learning journey is being okay with taking positive, constructive criticism. And that's also a skill set that I don't think a lot of people are building very well right now.
That is
I
very
agree.
true.
Well, and you're talking about psychological safety. That's sort of like an umbrella of what we've been talking about
Yep.
of having people make mistakes, encouraging new ideas, and not making them feel like it's a life or death decision that is going to ruin their career.
Correct.
But I think some of the, I see it, I have teenage and early 20 kids. And I mean, the introduction of always being in a digital world from social media to AI that they've had, like, I see a perfection expectation that is really pervasive in young people that is definitely, if you're brand new and, just graduated and you're coming in, like that's a different that this perfectionism and this psychological, fear, failure, and psychological safety, I think it's all intertwined.
Agreed. I've actually heard that more and more parents are having to take their kids to a psychiatrist or a counselor due to perfectionism, like being an issue. So it's definitely I hate generational things, but it's definitely a younger generation. But it's also like I think all of us just naturally want things to go really well.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's just pressure, which I think we've talked about a couple of times, like that recipe for burnout, the pressure that you might feel from all sides of what you're doing, from a client, from a boss, from a business leader, et cetera. But I mean, to go back to the lessons learned conversation, I mean, that was a huge part of what we talked about in Columbus, I feel like, was different strategies for how people are sitting down to postmortem a project and what worked great, what did not. How do you document that effectively as well?
Yeah. So I love the post-mortem conversation that we had in Columbus, because one of the things that I like we talked about a little bit is that missing middle, and we're losing institutional memory because people are sometimes leaving the industry or they're staying in the industry too long. And so the post-mortem conversation is really about sitting down after a project and saying what went well, what didn't, what can we improve, what did we learn, and how can we make it, something that we do differently and make it a process. And it's not just something I think the person shared that they do it after every project, even after interviews. And I think that's just a healthy process. Somebody else shared that one of the ways that they're trying to get that institutional learning and memory and knowledge transferred is they just have a Teams channel. And whenever they make a decision or like a lessons learned, I think actually it was lessons learned channel where they just drop that in Teams. And I think just sharing things like that makes the transparency of why we're making the decisions so easy to create. And that's a learning that I think the younger generations are wanting to know is like, why did you make that decision? Why did you tell me this is not working? And I don't think it's a way because they're trying to question us 100%. I think it's just because they're trying to understand the why, the judgment behind it.
We're curious. Designers are, I think, naturally curious people. And yeah, that sort of like, why? Well, why did you do that? And I think as leaders, we have to be careful not to put a generational stereotype out there when we get questioned, and to just be like, here's why, and let that there. And we did talk about some of that stuff too. I do think there was a note up here that I thought was interesting of we can't scroll up, but it was right at the top here of like, this person said like they need a therapist or a business coach or a confidence, whatever, but it needs a place to have these discussions, from an IIDA chapter standpoint. I feel like there is desire to have these kinds of conversations more often.
Yes.
And it only helps us. Sometimes we just want to vent. Sometimes we just want to be heard. Sometimes we want to feel like we are not alone in the chaos of what we're going through. And so it might be something to absolutely, facilitate like the place to have the discussion.
And I've been to quite a few Thrives now. And it felt this year to me like so much more of an open conversation that was run by the attendees and less of us sort of monologuing about
Correct.
what we wanted to get out of them, which happens occasionally when you're talking about really niche topics. But I think when we're talking about leadership in the future of what the industry is, everyone is a lot more well-versed in that than you might be an expert in sustainability of a carpet tile. You know what I mean? It varies so widely. So I think the conversation was much more productive in this vein as well.
It just struck me. So at IIDA, we have our industry roundtable that happens at the beginning of every year. And Kimball sponsors the Ask portion of it, which is basically where you can ask a designer, ask a dealer, anything, and a manufacturer, like anything. And I feel like that's just a great format that I think we could take this idea and you bring a sustainability expert, you bring a regenerative materials person together, you bring somebody around like a topic, people just get to ask questions. And that's a very psychologically safe way to be able to ask the question and not feel like you're going to get, again, dinged, or people might think that you're not smart or intelligent because you don't know the answer to the question.
I guess that's a great point back to kind of the topic at hand of the fear of the perception that you don't know as much, the imposter syndrome. I mean, I get it. Same thing.
Back to some of that perfection that we all
absolutely. And just especially I think in an industry where we are not always considered the most important or the most vital to a project. I think as an industry, we have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder as well.
I had learned very early on that I try too hard to prove that I should be in the room and that I'm worth being listened to. And what I found more and more as we've gone through, and even in the conversations that we have, is again, we're all in the same place. We are like all going through the same things. You just have to have that empathy, that ability to listen to what's being said to you. And that just is something that comes with time and confidence and practice.
Yeah. At CLC this year, it reminds me of like, kind of back to like, can't vet to my husband behind and just like some of these things that we're talking about. In a chapter with 5 city centers, like, I mean, we can do as a chapter kind of whatever we want, right? Like, that's the beauty of it. And I mean, is there it just reminded me of this, like, is there like a match that can be made that you could just pick up the phone and be like, I can't talk to my husband every night, with this Shannon saying, right? But boy, friend over there in this city center, I gotta just burn your ear for a minute about something that is just, I'm struggling with. And I think that there's more that we can do in that respect to help facilitate the conversations, bring this idea of like, I need a place to do it, and connect the chapter in a little bit of a different way that might be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, not to be the person that's always the cheerleader for joining an IIDA committee, but I am always every event. But I mean, I think we get that. Like I have that with like Megan Marshman or Bethany Williams or Courtney Kessler, like very easy because we have this relationship through our professional organization to text, call, whatever. What is your opinion on this tool you're using in your business? We have a Slack channel that it's a question of like, hey, we're looking for this type of wall panel. Does anyone have any recommendations? So just trying to invest in more tools for the broader membership for how we can have some of these more like casual conversations, I think is definitely an important step we can take.
And I also think if you're a leader in your firm or you want to be in a leadership position, maybe suggest having a conversation like this, like once a month or something like that, where it's on a topic and no questions are off the table. It's just a place to like learn and to learn how to have questions or ask questions.
And a way that can be facilitated in a non-threatening way is have a form they can submit their questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
So the question gets, at the end of the day, like the most productive thing that could happen is the question gets answered. And so if it's scary to ask the question live, give them a channel that doesn't prevent them from asking the question. And I think, sometimes we have to, especially from a neurodivergent standpoint, like some of these forums have to have numerous ways to gather information.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to talk about it from our IIDA perspective. And then I think back to another conversation piece in Columbus about bringing in these emerging leaders that you think are potentially the next step in the succession planning process into exactly what you're talking about, a business leader meeting, a discussion on business development and the pipeline in the future and things like that. So, I mean, I think the more our industry grows, the more everyone needs to be more of a seat at the table to kind of be an expert and help clients understand the value of what we do as well.
There's nothing more valuable than exposure. Just listening and being exposed to those kinds of conversations for people that kind of put their hand up and who want that next step. That's a great idea.
Yeah, we heard a lot about that. I feel like from all 3 that I was at about identifying who those people are is a challenge for everybody across the board. I think, it's the amount of exposure you're getting to someone too. If you work for a very large company with a lot of designers, you might not be able to, as an individual, identify someone who's the next step. But how you have those conversations as a leadership team, I think is really vital to how you develop that next group of leaders.
Great.
And I think, I mean, not to segue us too much into the advocacy point of view, but we've been talking a little bit about what the profession is, what does it mean, the chip on our shoulder. But I mean, there was a lot about explaining our value to our architecture colleagues as well and other leaders.
Which and even like we talked a little bit in Cincinnati about sometimes the only way to move up is to go into a PM role.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for the purity of design? And and then we did have the discussion on the architect component of it, but, you know, I don't know many people that are very successful with chips on shoulders.
Mhm.
And so we have to remind ourselves, like, I love this. I always think people sometimes like carry backpacks. I think I told you guys
Yeah.
this, like, and we end up through time, like putting these little grievances in there, and you gotta take it and dump it out. Like, just take it, dump out your backpack full of grievances and move forward, because realistically, we can't have chips on our shoulder.
Mhm. And we all have to work together.
Yeah.
There's not a world, I mean, occasionally you don't, but there's not really a world where our two professions don't overlap for
Yeah.
a majority of what we do. So I think just being able to communicate clearly to our colleagues and I think we have more of the pressure to come to the table with a clearer mind than maybe they do, unfortunately or fortunately.
And there are plenty of advocates.
Absolutely.
Really.
Very much
That
so.
was a theme as well. Lots of people.
We have
talking about
allies,
the shift.
advocates,
Yeah.
and yes.
Mhm.
And I think we just need to continue that momentum and pour our time into that.
Yeah. I think the only thing that and this wasn't part of the conversation, but there is also just a slight trap in this too, in that when we start comparing ourselves like with architecture and we start to name ourselves the same way that like architectural professions name themselves,
Uh-huh.
it does limit us some. And I think that comes back to the conversation we were having about what is the pathway forward? Is there only one linear path forward? Does it have to go from designer 1 to designer 2 to designer 3 to PM to like project manager 2 to like, like
Mhm.
I get all the steps because we have to have them from like an HR band standpoint and understanding like where we can grow. But I think some of that rigidity of those name titles also holds us back. And then when we are saying I'm a project manager as a designer, but you have a project manager who's an architect, they're trying to figure out
Uh-huh.
what are you doing differently than I'm doing differently. So maybe there's some naming conventions that we could start to explore that are our own, so that when we talk about advocating for who we are as a profession, it models more of what we do. Like if we are a human manager, project manager, let's just say that's not the right word. Please don't take that. Please don't use it. But if we're managing human outcomes, that's a different project management thing that we are doing through design.
Sure.
So maybe, again, thinking about what we do as designers and using that for some of our lexicon and our pathways forward.
Mhm. We actually talked a lot about titles and
We did.
paths in
Mhm.
Cleveland as well. Like, I think it has carried across. There's not a great model, because I think everyone thinks of like the AIA model title and compensation calculator, and I don't know that we have one that is as robust or has the same sort of outline. So I think it's a lot of.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to launch our compensation calculator that we just did our survey again. So
Yeah.
be on the lookout for that to come through in your emails.
Waiting. I'm so excited. But yeah, I mean, I think tools like that I did hear a lot about the types of tools people would like to see from us as well. So I think compensation calculator, obviously very important. We talked a little bit about an AI sort of framework around some language and how you work
Mhm.
through that as a company, but I don't know that we have the same types of resources from a business standpoint of like, this is the exact template that we're going to use in everything the
Yeah.
way that an architect does, because we are a younger profession as well.
Mhm.
And I think that's some of the things that I'm trying to figure out and work through at IADA too. Because one of the things that we talked about, to your point, was that we were talking about AI and who's using it and how are they using it. And I asked a question and just asked, who has an AI governance policy? And I think you raised your hand. I think you might have been the only one, or maybe there was another person there.
Maybe, yeah.
That's a very dangerous position to be in right now. Every company needs to have an AI governance policy, but I would actually say it's a emerging technology governance policy. So that way you're not just like having to create a new one for each one.
Yep.
And that's a simple thing where you're just like, here are the tools that we vetted. Here are the tools that you're allowed to use. Here's what you can use them for. If you find something that you think is a tool that we should be using, here's the channel of how you suggest it and bring it up to each other. And I think those are the kind of things that I'm hearing from a lot of people, and we heard in the room, that I'm taking back to IADA and saying, is this something that we could help to provide to the industry as well? So that way, if you don't have the resources, if you don't have all of the team and the time and the talent, there should be a standard form that you can use to say, we're going to take this and then maybe modify it slightly for what we need to do.
Yeah. To couple on the governance piece, we talked a touch on that. But there is, I think, room whether it's at HQ or at the chapter level or in your own firms, how are you training AI?
Mhm.
You know, and what I noticed in the two that I moderated is that there are some power users and some that are like, I have not even gone there yet. And that, right, that's a big spectrum.
Mhm.
But I think something that I'm noticing companies doing, we're doing it, is offering like AI foundational
Mhm.
training. What is it? What tools are it? Well, how do you prompt? How do you do this? Intermediate, advanced, and kind of meeting people where they are. But I think to have sort of the governance needs then to have the coupled
The education.
education piece of it that go hand in hand together so that you don't have people putting in, you know, IP
Uh-huh.
into it,
It's walking
right?
out the door, I
It's
guarantee it.
walking out the door, or you don't, or people are scared of it and they're fearful that like my job's gonna go away if I use it, you
Mhm.
know, and when in reality, I think it's opening doors for a variety of different types of jobs. I think a lot of things are gonna change, but so that there's a lot to it that
Yeah.
we're on sort of this ramp.
Yeah.
for.
There's a lot of fear around AI. I was actually, so Kaylin Reed is Kimball's in-house futurist, and she and I often have conversations about things. And we were talking about AI because everybody right now is again putting out there, and I think what we talked about in the room too is that it's going to take the creative part, it's going to take over our roles, it's going to do all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting here kind of like going, no, it's not. Because in my opinion, and this is what we were talking about, I think AI creates beige intelligence because it's not quite cool and colorful and not quite all there, but it's not quite dull at the same time too. It's just a nice neutral middle ground of what it's creating, which is what it should be. It should be our iteration mechanism too. So I think
Build.
we need to build that kind of thinking around it versus the I'm not touching it until somebody else touches it first.
Mhm. Well, I mean, a lot of it is what is the thinking process behind
Mhm.
when you're using, how you're using it, like the why as well. Like, is there a reason you need to use AI for this task? What efficiencies is it producing? And how do you document when it's efficient and when it isn't? Because it is, I mean, it's fairly new for a lot of folks.
Mhm.
I think we can attest in that in all of our sessions, governance policies don't exist. People aren't
Training
sure.
isn't really, you know, I think people are discovering, and I don't even know if we're capturing all the ways that it is bringing value or destroying that, you know,
Absolutely.
human thinking,
Mhm.
you know, because you could let it, like that did come up in, sometimes I get mixed up in my mind which
Sure.
one I was at, but it did come up like you cannot rely on it to do everything for you. Your brain, actual intelligence
Mhm.
is greater than
Yeah,
a artificial intelligence, and don't get caught in that trap. You know, those that are power users of it.
absolutely. I mean, and to go back to the rendering conversation about the pretty picture outweighing the substance in people's minds. And I think that's purely from like a visual reaction standpoint, not truly from a understanding the project knowledge
Yeah.
standpoint either,
Mhm.
which is hard to navigate because you kind of need the pretty picture to sell the product, but you also have to know how to get there in the end.
You have to know if that pretty picture would actually stand up when it's built.
Yes, totally.
Because like the number of times it's told me something and I'm like, that's actually not factually true.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
I apologize. You caught me. Like,
Yeah,
I don't need to catch you. I need you to like
yes.
be
Don't-
better at your job. This is where I feel like I'm mentoring AI at this point.
Yes,
But I
yes,
think
I yell. I'm
It's a
like,
great-
what are you doing?
Yes, it's a great example though that both of you, I mean, I think all of us in this room probably use it to various degrees
Mhm.
and it's that critical thinking piece of, you know, you have to fact check, you know, you have to.
Mhm.
So then you then take the second layer of thinking of when is it easy and efficient to use it and when is it just another step in my process?
Yep.
And I think well, it's hard because maybe earlier in your career, you can find a way to make what you're doing more efficient. But then as you're later in your career, you know, this is not maybe the most effective use of our
Correct.
time,
Yeah.
effort, et cetera.
Yes.
In my opinion, and from all the research that I've been seeing, I do think that AI is going to hit hardest on the front end and then on the back end of a project,
Mhm.
where a lot of the front end iteration and thought process, and then the back end for the actual like building of the thing itself. I think the middle part is where we are safest because it's where our judgment zone lives. It's where we have to build the understanding of, again, the why the decisions are made and what decisions need to happen. And I think that's the part that we should be really over indexing on right now is our value proposition to the industry, to our clients, and to ourselves.
Are there things you, off the top of your head, not to put you on the spot, but that should never, we don't think it'll ever get touched from an AI standpoint in what we do?
I mean, the final decision,
Mhm.
the staking of your reputation, what you're putting out there is something that AI will never touch because it has no liability to it.
Mhm.
The company might, but AI itself does not. And so I think your reputation, your decision-making process is something that, let me take that back. It can impact your decision-making process if you let it, but I don't think it should.
Sure,
Mhm.
I think that makes sense.
Like the human reaction
Mhm.
of like an actual walkthrough and seeing people respond to something that you created.
Mm.
I mean, I guess there could be like a roving camera that listen, who knows
Who
where
knows?
this world is
Right.
going, but some of the things I think are really exciting is I often hear, we don't do post occupancy. There's not enough fee in it. We got to analyze it. That's the perfect thing to have AI do, right?
Mhm.
Get get it, show how the design helped and some things that we can improve upon it and let it analyze. I do think that there are plenty of ways that we can use the tool. It is a tool
Mhm.
and use it for the things that, aren't maybe our favorite things to do or aren't things that are the most profitable
Yeah,
from a
correct.
business standpoint that are critical in the grand scheme of better design.
Absolutely.
Let me use it to write a business development pitch or an RFP response or something like that. So that way I can spend time sketching and iterating on the actual design and looking at the materials more thoroughly and investigating what's new and what's possible.
Mhm.
I don't know if Ryan Castle's on the call, but one of my favorite examples that he uses is for codes in Excel. So he is a master at making a very complex spreadsheet that has saved a lot of time, effort, etc. And I think, to your point, the analysis, the things that you would be spending plenty of man hours on that can spend money on your AI platform instead to do that, I think is a valuable business proposition as well.
But this is where I again say, have an understanding of what you want AI to do first before you go and use AI.
Mhm.
Like,
Yes.
understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And it's not just, I need more time. It's
Yeah.
this is a very frustrating part of the process that should be easier.
Yes.
That's a problem to solve. That's when you use the tool, not letting the tool dictate what it should be for.
Oh,
Ryan.
thank you, Ryan. AI can't reignite the passion, but it can open up time and find that passion.
There
Hey,
you go.
Buzzwords, love it.
yeah.
Well, I'll actually transition us then to kind of our final thoughts, just about where we think the future of this conversation can take us. So do either of you have like one or two takeaways for a firm leader that you think from this conversation you'd like people to leave with? I know that's, again, so much pressure.
Yeah. And I missed the memo that that question was coming. So off the cut. Yeah,
I know.
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway that I would want anybody who's listening to this conversation, leader, whomever, is we need to act more. We need to stop waiting. I think we are at a really big moment in our industry, in our world's history, and there's lots of opportunities that I'm seeing ahead. And all I keep hearing about are the limitations and well, if I try that, I might have to give up this. Trade-offs are a natural part of our life and part of our business too. We trade off whether we use this carpet or that carpet, or whether we choose this piece of furniture or that piece of furniture, or whether we put the room here or over there. It's a natural part. So we just need to be okay with like acting on some of those ideas. And then to your point about post-occupancy, learning on them.
Mhm.
And I will do one small plug for IADA. So that's why at IADA, we built IADA Futures, which is the department that I now lead. And we are getting ready to release our first ever product from that, which is going to be the Futures Readiness Index. And I spent 6 months putting together, doing research, and it basically maps out 7 futures that our industry could face. what capabilities we would need to develop in order to meet those futures. So there's new skills, new roles, new titles, new typologies, and then it provides an assessment of where we are as an industry right now to meet those futures, and then a self-assessment where you can assess yourself to see how close you are to being able to do some of those things. Because that's the part where you can say, well, you know what, I really want to do this part and this skill capability, that can be my differentiator, but I'm only at a 2 out of a 5 right now, which means that I need to be doing something extra. And that's the last half of the index where it talks about the actions we can take moving forward.
Interesting.
I would say, you know, maybe a rally cry on if we want something different, it is up to every single one of us to make that. Right? We have to lean in to these kinds of conversations more often. I think they're being craved. And yes, we can wait for someone, IIDA, our companies or whatever, but we also talked about in both of mine that I moderated that those of us, we didn't get here by somebody opening the door for us, right? And so like that same grit and determination that we had to enter the world of design, to be a champion when sometimes you don't feel like the world sees you. Damn it, we're designers. Let's go, right? Like, so if we want, it reminds me of like when we talk about culture with a company, the culture is a living being thing. And if you can either add to it or you can, you know, sort of turn a blind eye to it, we have to get back to contributing for ourselves and leaning in. And we can do it at the chapter level. We can do that in the individual city center. We can do that in a very micro community of like, I saw somebody has a 6-week coffee chat every, like this can be done in a myriad of ways, but it's up to us to do it.
Absolutely.
And there's a phrase that I learned, you should be asking what now, not now what. Because if you're asking now what, it means you're behind. It means you're already trying to play catch up. So if you ask what now, that means you're going to act, you're going to do something, you're going to test, you're going to fail, you're going to whatever, you're going to move the needle forward versus being drug into whatever else somebody else creates. And that's the now what part. When you're in somebody else's future that they created, whether it's a technology company, whether it's a developer, whomever, they're creating those rules where you should have probably stepped in to define the rules yourself.
Agreed. I think the one thing that I will just leave everyone with is I think we had a lot of conversation about communication and culture as well. Not that it's possible to set up an individual approach to each human that you're monitoring, but trying to learn from each other and how you best work together, I think is the best path forward. And that starts with, to your point, culture, and what you put in is what you get out. So I think that wraps us up. I don't know, do either of you have any final thoughts you want to share? We covered it all?
I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, I think hopefully you guys found value in this conversation. Dan Benford, I can't, like, what a commitment there. Hello, Dan. Blue skies, driving wheel, be safe.
Yes, please.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is a great forum and should do it more often.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks to Loth for letting us use your space
Yes,
too.
in the vault with this
for the vault.
fabulous
This is-
technology and background.
and the HVAC just kicked off,
Yeah.
so.
There you go. Awesome.
Amazing.
Again, thank you everybody who joined us for the Thrive Roundtables. Thank you to everyone who came curious to hear more about the conversation. We will be sending out postcards. Our plan is to get the recording of this session as well from Loth and post it to the website. So just a lot of appreciation for people's interest. And, I think the chapter is very interested too in hearing more feedback about this program, how it can grow and how we can offer more to our members. So if there's something that's in your mind, you're thinking about, feel free to reach out to an IIGA member leader or hop on our website and, see who you're connected to, and feel free to share feedback to us as well. So thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Great job. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Good job. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.